May 5th, 1943. North Atlantic, 40 hours. Wind at force 9, seas stacking like black cliffs, sleet knifing sideways. On convoy ONS-5's starboard beam, able seaman Thomas Keene braces against the corvette's rail as the bow falls into a trough and the world turns to spray. He counts the seconds to the next green flare. He knows what it means. Contact, close, and hungry. 10 miles out, a Type 7 U-boat rides the ridge of a wave like a seal, decks awash, bridge crew strapped in. The watch officer drags a mitten across the periscope lens and whispers to the night, "Nur noch 10 Minuten." 10 minutes more. He believes the ocean hides him. He believes darkness is an ally. In May 1943, that belief dies. By the end of the month, German U-boat losses will spike to a number that defies the logic of the past 3 years. The killing curve reverses. A submarine will be lost on average every few hours. And the Wolfpack, once a legend whispered in mess decks and kitchens, will start to look mortal. Dawn comes late this far north. Radar screens glow earlier. Somewhere to the west, a Liberator's operator nudges a colleague and taps a bright pip. Somewhere below decks on a destroyer, a radio direction finder swings, needles crossing like crosshairs. And somewhere in a damp headquarters room in Liverpool, a Wren teleprinter chatters a steady line of digits that means a shadower has transmitted, again and again, and the ocean, vast and indifferent, has started to betray the hunters. The story opens on one face in a gale, then cuts to maps, counters, and clocks. 6 years of tonnage arithmetic, 3 years of tactical evolution, 30 days in which the math breaks. What do numbers mean to a man staring down a wave? Everything. What do waves mean to a staff officer staring down numbers? Also everything. By May 1st, 1943, the North Atlantic is not a highway, it is a breathing machine. Every 12 hours, convoys materialize on the edge of radio range and vanish under cloud. Rows of freighters steam at 8 knots, stacked with wheat and steel, tanks and gasoline, tinned meat and letters. Their keel lines are the oxygen hoses of Britain. The Wolfpack plan, simple in outline, lethal in execution, targets the hose where it is narrowest. The doctrine is not romantic, it is arithmetic. The BDU, the U-boat command, screens the western approaches with patrol lines, long strings of submarines spaced by the horizon. One finds a convoy and radios a contact report. Others converge for a night attack on the surface, diesel engines roaring above the storm, firing spreads at silhouettes and breaking away before the escorts can close. Each boat keeps its batteries topped by running on the surface after dark. Darkness is safety, radio is coordination, mass is killing power, and for 1,000 days it works often enough to seem inevitable. Now zoom out again. Map needles mark inbound convoys, HX and SC from Halifax and Sydney, outbound ONS and ON, fast and slow columns, rescue ships stationed aft, escorts spread like thorns around a hedgehog. On another map, dots move from Brest, La Pallice, Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, and Bergen, pens of concrete and rebar, out into the North Atlantic. The distance between the dots is measured in fuel, battery endurance, and chance. In German offices, Admiral Karl Donitz repeats his central premise, war on tonnage. Sink merchant ships faster than the enemy can build them. The island economy will choke. In Allied rooms, Sir Max Horton in Liverpool pushes a different idea, support groups that can leave a convoy to hunt and kill, while staff officers tally escort carriers, long-range aircraft hours, and centimetric radar sets leaving the factory. The numbers had leaned German earlier. Winter 1942-43 delivered convoys mauled under grim weather. The second happy time along the American coast had seemed to confirm Donitz's theory. But the curve had begun to bend. New sets hummed on coastal shelves. New aircraft patrolled beyond yesterday's range. New tactics demanded less defense and more pressure. And by late April, shots exchanged around ONS-5 hinted at something that would only become clear when May's ledger closed. The scene returns to a wave. Keene spits salt. The corvette turns, her bow gun dark with spray. The sonar room, ASTIC operators and headphones, breathes in unison. The officer of the watch calls a bearing. The engines answer. Somewhere in the black, the U-boat's commander, Kapitänleutnant Ernst M., licks dry lips, stares at a stopwatch, and feels the deck shudder as the next roller hits. He trusts the night. He does not know the night now answers to a different set of eyes. By May's first week, the unseen has been seen. The North Atlantic had taught both sides the same lesson. Time is a weapon. Donitz used it to stack hunters along the convoy routes. Horton used it to stretch a shield over the Black Pit, that cruel gap in air cover where even brave men felt alone. By 1943, the pit had shrunk. Longer-legged liberators from Iceland and Northern Ireland reached deeper. Escort carriers, cheap, slow, decisive, brought a flight deck into the convoy's heart. Each hour in the sky multiplied the chance that a surface submarine, charging batteries in the night, would be surprised by an enemy it could not see. The U-boat's strengths were real. A Type 7 was simple, robust, and hard to kill. On the surface, she sprinted faster than most escorts. Submerged, she became a stealth weapon, but her lungs were the air above. She had to breathe at night, and that single metabolic fact shaped a doctrine. For 3 years, that doctrine had been enough. It no longer was. What changed? Not one thing, but a chain of things. We follow the chain link by link. First link, radio. German discipline and central control had been an edge. Boats reported contacts, requested reinforcements, and received orders, all within minutes. But every transmission had a signature. Allied high-frequency direction finding, Huff-Duff, meant those signatures could be triangulated in seconds. A single contact report, once the key to massing the pack, became the start of a hunt on the shadower. Even without reading the content, needles swinging on a console drew invisible lines that crossed where a submarine spoke too long. Second link, radar. Early sets at decometric wavelengths had been good enough on a calm sea and a steady target. U-boats adapted by fitting receivers, METOX boxes that warned of the radar's approach. They ducked under in time. But the Allied move to centimetric radar changed the math. The new waves were shorter, the returns clearer, the sets silent as cats. METOX couldn't hear them. Night stopped being a wall and became a window. Third link, endurance overhead. The ocean is too big for luck, but enough aircraft in the right place an hour can make luck irrelevant. Long-range patrols meant that an area once safe from scouting eyes was now a place where a dot on a scope might blossom into a flare, a vector, a ladder of water rising from a depth charge. Escort carriers folded the sky into the convoy itself. Planes launched at dawn, at dusk, and, when the weather let them, between. Long shadows became long knives. Fourth link, weapons and tactics. Depth charges had been blunt tools. Patterns dropped on guesses. Hedgehog projectors fired small bombs ahead of the ship that exploded only on contact, telling an Aztec operator whether he had a hit, not just a concussion. Charges were set shallow when radar or visual evidence said the boat had crash-dived only seconds before. Support groups free from the tether of the convoy could conduct deliberate hunts lasting hours. Contact, loss, regain, attack, pause, listen. Attack again. It wore down crews. It made the ocean feel small. Fifth link, production and repair. The U-boat force was not infinite. Losses needed pipeline time to replace. Crews needed training that took longer than hulls took welding. German yards still produced boats at a steady rate, but the net rows of the force depended on how many never returned. And when boats were driven under and under again, limping home with fuel low and batteries scarred, the time they spent at sea, the only time that counted for results, shrank. This chain meets flesh in the second week of May. ONS-5 stretches in 2 ragged columns. Snow flurries punch visibility down to nothing, and then lift to a murky mile. The escort group, gaunt men passing enamel mugs hand to hand, rotates between screen and sleep. The boilers throb. The submarines have assembled. Orders move over kilocycles. A shadower hangs on the convoy's flank, updating, coaxing the pack close. But something is different, and the difference has teeth. A destroyer's HFDF operator calls bearing changes that make no sense, unless you assume the transmitter is not the convoy, not a false echo, but a submarine talking too long. The escort turns hard, engines flogging. The U-boat's bridge hears nothing and sees nothing until the destroyer's bow wave rears white in the night. The first pattern goes in shallow. Water leaps. The U-boat's helmsman feels the hull ring. He sees a green spark as a wire arcs. The captain's order is terse. Down to 60. Silent now. The boat slides into blackness, and the world becomes a vibration in the teeth. On the destroyer, the Aztec trace fuzzes, then hardens, then vanishes as the layers shift. The captain holds his hand over the stopwatches on the chart table and waits. He can afford to wait. The convoy is moving, but others can take his place. The pattern repeats. Contact, run-in, weapons, listen. until the ocean returns something more than rumor, a swirl of oil, a plank, a life buoy. Not every fight ends with wreckage on the surface. Some end with damage declared and a shake of the head. But in May, the ratio slides. The sea gives up more evidence. The boats that escape surface later with dents and split seams and men who sleep in snatches and wake sweating. We are hunted now. A petty officer in UXYZ grumbles to his mate as he tightens his collar, his hands shaking. He is not wrong. Parallel to ONS-5, other convoys move. HX-239 plows eastbound under a gray lid of cloud. Its air cover extends longer than any previous run. An escort carrier's planes fan outward at the start and end of daylight like wings opening and closing. A radar operator sees a pip where a pip should not be, calls it, and a pilot noses down through rags of cloud to find a sliver of black on black. The U-boat captain has perhaps 12 seconds to decide. Dive and trust the ocean, or bet on the night. He chooses the ocean. The aircraft's depth bombs, a new pattern, a little deeper than guesses from last year, walk across the last place where the periscope feather was seen. SC-130 moves slow, a temptation, a prize. It does not lose a ship. The pack that should have carved it open runs into a wall of air and radar and discipline. A lesson repeats. Massive attackers means massive radio signals, means massive bearings, and massed bearings turn into a box with shrinking edges. The escorts grow more confident and less reactive. Instead of waiting at the convoy's side, they sprint outward, probing at the edges where the shadower must be. They do not always find him, but they find him more often than the month before, and much more often than the year before. Look at the ledgers. In March, Allied losses had looked like a tide coming in. In April, the tide stopped. In May, it turns. U-boat commanders who would once write 2 ships, perhaps 3, now write none. 2 forced to dive, depth charges at intervals through the night. Those intervals matter. They mean hours lost to survival rather than attack. They mean torpedoes carried back home. They mean fuel burn for no ships sunk. The voice from shore changes too. Donitz had sent crews to sea with a conviction that the Wolfpack would overwhelm any escort screen. In early May, his signals carry more caution. Use your eyes. Conserve your torpedoes. Beware the aircraft. The boats read the lines in between them. The ocean seems patient, but is not forgiving. None of this is abstract to Thomas Keane on the Corvette's wet deck. He can count the difference in minutes awake. There are more action stations, more run-ins, more moments when the ship heels and the screws bite air. He is not a mathematician. He is a man with chapped knuckles who learns to listen for the pause before the captain says fire. He sees the Hedgehog's bombs arc forward in a neat ladder and holds his breath between arc and splash and the long half-minute of waiting for a hard thump that means a hit. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't, but he begins to believe something he dared not believe in February. The sea, which had seemed to belong to the other side after sundown, is no longer theirs. The tension of ONS-5's first nights resolves into a fugue of encounters. A merchantman's bow erupts at 2:12, 1 torpedo, 1 flare of oil fire leaning with the wind. Men step from ladder to freezing water, shouting numbers and names. An escort lives in 2 directions at once, forward toward the flash, back toward the black shape that shouldn't be there. Another U-boat drives in at masthead height, wash white at the bow, 3 tracks leaving her tubes. 1 misses by a miracle, 1 slaps a hull plate and fails, 1 finds a tanker that turns into a furnace and then a starless patch of steam. The fishermen's sons on both sides learn what steel can and cannot do at 8 knots in a gale. At dawn, the air cover returns. A pilot with stiff shoulders after hours in a Liberator picks a line of whitecaps that breaks wrong, skims lower, and sees the sudden knife of a periscope duck. He drops a pattern that rewards the faith of the man who taught him to trust small differences on a gray sea. 2 days later, he will land and stand in a mess hall where a chalkboard tallies sightings and attacks and, more often now, confirmed kills. He will eat a breakfast that tastes like nothing and everything. He will write a line to his brother that sounds brave and then cross it out and write the truth. We are turning them back. Support groups prove their worth in a language only professionals spoke before May, but everyone will understand after. Persistence. Before escorts that drove off an attacker had to sprint back to station, the convoy could not afford to lose its thorns. Now, a hunter-killer group can peel out and hold the contact. A trail of bubbles that once dissolved into anonymity becomes a path. A sound that once faded becomes a pattern. The result is not flashy, it is a slow suffocation. This pressure produces choices. U-boat captains, once bold in the night, try day approaches under a low ceiling. They meet radar. They try submerged attacks. Batteries cut their time and speed. They hug the edge of a convoy. They meet a corvette that has learned to sniff, zig, and then pounce. They shadow and radio. They attract swarms that should be victims but instead are killers. It is not that the sea has changed. It is that human innovation has turned the sea into a different kind of signal. The German side is not blind. Engineers scramble to counter centimetric radar. Comforting rumors spread among crews. The enemy is using some new trick that will be defeated by turning off our warning boxes, by using darkness differently, by climbing, by diving. Sometimes superstition stands in for science. Sometimes despair masquerades as prudence. In cramped compartments, petty officers become philosophers. If we transmit, they find us, says one in U-123's forward quarters, and if we don't transmit, we are alone. He is not quoting a manual, he is summing up a doctrine at its breaking point. By mid-May, weather lifts. What bad weather gave to the U-boats, concealment, it also gave to the escorts, training and stress. When the sky clears and the ceiling lifts, aircraft make up for lost hours with a hunger born of months of frustration. The black pit shrinks under hard sun and soft cloud. The long straight that used to feel like a sacrificial stretch becomes a place where help appears with the drone of 4 engines and a dot that grows into safety. And yet the cost remains human. Sailors still die in cold water in minutes. Convoy commanders still write terse signals, situation in hand, that keep fear from seeping into the column. Corvettes still shake as depth charges go and plates all but flex. Submariners still sit on mess benches in the glow of a red bulb and listen to the creak that follows a close pattern. This is not a clean turn, it is a grind. What happens next makes the pattern obvious. Around ONS-5, the pack suffers losses that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. At least 6 submarines will not answer roll call. The convoy loses ships, men in the water, lifeboats overturned, oil on skin, but the exchange rate is now a debate, a calculation carried into rooms where staff officers draw conclusions with rulers and pencils. The Wolfpacks' promise to overwhelm, to terrify, to take without payment has been undercut by a more expensive truth. Each attack costs them time, fuel, and increasingly, blood. On shore, Max Horton pushes his pins forward. Find the shadower, he tells his captains in words they already understand. Smother him, make him dive. If he dives, he cannot guide. The insight is simple, the execution brutal, the result cumulative. Merchantmen are saved not only by shooting down torpedoes with lead or dodging tracks in a gale, but by a new economy of pressure. On the other shore, Donitz measures monthly totals, daily signals, and nights of silence that mean more than chatter. He has always believed in offensive spirit. He now believes in arithmetic. Radios that once sang of ships sunk now report damage, forced dives, and returns requested. He hears what the men are saying without words. Belief, hard and shiny in 1941, has picked up scratches. It will crack in May. Not through an explosion, but through a series of small sounds. A hedgehog's dry clicks before launch, a radar's quiet sweep, a pencil tapping a plotting table, a pilot's breath held as he rides a wave top and commits to a run. The Wolfpack is still dangerous. It is still there, but its bite draws blood with a broken tooth. The convoy ONS-5 clears its worst patch and steams on. Its dead cannot be reclaimed from the cold. Its surviving ships, slow as the weather, remember the nights when funnels glowed and wakes turned silver and green. Keane will go ashore months later and tell a friend in a bar that he still hears the creak before the charges go off, that he still tastes oil when he wakes, that he can tell you the second between a splash and a bang. He will not say he watched a turning point. He will say he watched a lot of small things add up. Because that is what May becomes, accumulation, not miracle. The inventions matter, but not alone. The people matter, but not alone. The system, escorts, aircraft, radios, factories, training cycles, doctrines adopted and abandoned, locks into phase and forces a choice none of the U-boat captains wanted to face. Attack and risk annihilation, or wait and watch the convoy pass intact. By May 23rd, the arithmetic has grown cruel for one side. The term Black May will be whispered by men who once laughed at the idea that the Atlantic could be closed to them. They will not stop fighting. They will not stop killing. But something has shifted beneath their feet and under their hulls. They can feel it in the way the sea carries sound, in the way the sky produces sudden threats, in the way orders read careful instead of bold. The month is not over yet. The numbers have not all been tallied. But from the lookout's eyes to the chalkboard in the mess, from the pins on the map to the dials on a set, the pattern is clear enough for any man honest with himself to see. The conviction that Wolfpacks could break any corridor has met a different kind of power. The compounding force of technology, organization, and relentless attention to the weak link. The open question remains, how to name the exact moment belief breaks. It is not a torpedo or a flare. It is a signal in a headquarters on the 24th day of May. It is a single order that admits what the month has said. Before that happens, we hold in the moment of men at sea, the throb of engines, the taste of metal on the tongue, the knowledge that their work across those days tilts the axis of a war. Shadows fall across a plotting table. A hand moves a pin. A finger slides down a list of losses and stops. The ocean, indifferent as ever, moves from gray to darker gray. Somewhere, a periscope lifts. Somewhere else, a radar sweeps. Noise becomes signal. Signal becomes decision. By May 23, 1943, the pattern was no longer a theory traced on grease pencil. It was a bruise you could press. Convoy after convoy clawed east and west with fewer gaps, more aircraft, steadier hands. The lines on plotting tables converged not on fat columns of freighters, but on the very boats sent to shadow them. In Liverpool, Sir Max Horton leaned over a chart and spoke the sentence that would flip the doctrine on its back. You don't save convoys by waiting. You save them by taking away the shadower. The room hummed the quiet assent of people watching a key turn in a lock. Night. North Atlantic. The pack closes one more time, as it always has, bold, fast, close. A destroyer's radar slices the black and paints a sliver where there should be only sea. The bearings line up. The chase begins. The U-boat captain orders a crash dive. 40 seconds later, he is in a world of pressure and creak, needles and sweat. Above him, the escorts do not peel back to the convoy. They circle. They listen. They wait. A hedgehog walk splashes forward and then silence. A beat too long. 1, 2, 3 sharp detonations. Not the heavy boom of depth charges, but the brittle knock of contact. Somewhere aft, oil blooms like an ink blot on gray water. The week becomes a grim ledger. SC-130 arrives without loss. Its pursuers don't. HX-239 steams under a movable ceiling of aircraft and leaves a trail of forced dives like mile markers. ONS-5, the convoy that opened this story, lurches out of its storm and leaves behind, in addition to its dead, a string of U-boats that fail to answer muster. On bridge wings, men who once braced for the inevitable now begin to expect the possible. Attack the attacker first. May 24, 1943. Flensburg. 10 hours. Karl Donitz reads the signals, the casualty lists, the silence. He has built a war on tonnage, on concentration, on the belief that will and mass can bend oceans. He lifts a pen and writes the order that says the ocean has bent him. To all boats, withdraw from the North Atlantic convoy routes, bis auf weiteres, until further notice. The sentence lands like a depth charge in reverse, silent, then a shock through steel. In a dozen steel tubes at sea, radiomen copy the signal and pass it forward with faces that say what the ink does not. The pack is called off. The wolves were not driven from the forest. The forest moved. That is the turn. The open loop closes. The man in the gale at 47 hours, the first week of May, did not know that the month would end with the hunters pulled back. He only knew that the night was changing shape, that something in the texture of the fight had shifted from chase to counterchase. The reveal is not a secret weapon in isolation, not a heroic duel crowned by fanfare, but a system reaching critical mass. Centimetric beams no one can hear, HFDF needles that make lines into traps, flight decks cut from merchant hulls, support groups unhooked from convoy geometry. The sentence is short because the truth is short. The thesis: Black May broke the Wolfpack not by killing the most boats, but by killing the belief that packs could rule the night. After the order, there is the quiet that follows a verdict. Crews who had run on the edge of fear and fatigue steam without the perpetual expectation of flares on the horizon. The escorts still stand to, still scan, still burn holes in the sky with their eyes. But the cadence changes. Action stations punctuate the day rather than define it. On a Corvette's mess deck, able seaman Thomas Keene cups a chipped mug and lets a warmth that isn't adrenaline through his fingers. He pretends not to read the chalk tally on the bulkhead. Everyone reads it. The German side begins a different kind of arithmetic. Losses in May outstrip training pipeline capacity. Hulls can be shaped faster than men can be made. The Atlantic feels suddenly shallow with risk. We cannot accept this rate. A staff officer writes in a neutral hand that fails to hide the obvious. The men at sea already know. Es ist anders. A machinist in UXXX mutters over the rattle of a loose valve. It is different. He is not thinking about doctrine. He is thinking about 2 runs last week where the boat never reached firing position. Forced down, held down, worn down. June does not bring relief. It brings adaptation. The Kriegsmarine tries new edges, snorkels to stay under longer, acoustic torpedoes that will hunt the screws, revised radio discipline, different patrol lines set farther from the routes. Each innovation bites, sometimes hard, often briefly. The Allies answer with decoys and noisemakers, with revised formations, with mathematics on shore that allocates aircraft by probability rather than habit. The chessboard grows more complex, and yet the shape of advantage remains. The human curve, unseen on most maps, is brutal. The U-boat arm will lose a majority of its men before the war ends, tens of thousands into cold water without graves. Courage does not save them from arithmetic. Escorts too pay. Depth charge racks empty into winter seas. Men carry the sound in their bones for years. Merchant sailors continue to take the torpedo's first blow, to climb down nets into black water, to count seconds with a chill that stabs. Black May is not a curtain drop. It is the moment when blood spent begins to change the balance faster than blood shed. Zoom out to systems again. By late 1943, American yards are having steel down the ways at a rate that would seem obscene if it were not necessary. The war will end with more than 2,700 Liberty ships built, tonnage that turns a strategic theory into a logistical fact. The curve Donitz drew on a wall, a line of sinkings that outpaces a line of construction, crosses and never meets again. Convoys thicken. Escorts grow teeth and patience. Aircraft range lengthens so far that maps need to be redrawn to make sense. The Black Pit, once a place with a proper noun, becomes a maritime memory. The culture aboard ships adjusts in small, telling ways. Where night had once meant an almost superstitious quiet, voices low, lights masked, men staring into dark, night now becomes another phase of the workday. We kept looking, but we looked outward, not just inward, Keene will say much later, trying to explain the change. Before, we counted our ships. After, we counted their masts. A destroyer's captain stops accepting the idea that he must always choose between protecting the box and punishing the hand that reaches for it. He does both, in sequence, with drills that now incorporate pursuit instead of merely impact. Support groups take on a personality. One in particular, led by Captain Frederick John Walker, treats the ocean as a hunting ground, not a lane to be guarded. His men codify deliberate cruelty to contact. If the trace fades, box it. If the box fails, rebox it. If the boat surfaces, keep it there with gunfire until it chooses steel or salt water. The tactic is ugly and precise. It saves lives a month hence by taking lives now. In wardrooms, nobody says it cleanly. In action, everybody understands. The German response grows more inwardly focused. Orders caution, hedge, diversify. Boats operate singly where they once massed. Some skippers grow careful, some grow reckless, gambling for a spike of tonnage that will defy a graph. A few win the toss and come home with claims. More do not come home. The repair pens in France hum without rest, but the rhythm is wrong. Too many boats arrive damaged, too many leave late, too many never arrive at all. The numbers tell the story without shouting. In the first months of 1943, Allied shipping losses were still measured in dozens of ships per month. After May, many months fall to low double digits, then to single digits on key routes. U-boat sinkings, once a hard-won handful in a season, become a drumbeat. The Atlantic, always dangerous, becomes negotiable. The Allied buildup for an invasion, men, tanks, petroleum, bombs, bread, accelerates. Logistics outrun fear. The psychological shift is as important as the numeric one. Shore stations no longer treat every eastbound convoy as a fraught bet. Commanders think in plans, not prayers. Merchant captains who once tightened their grip on the bridge wing at sunset now find themselves thinking about cargo damage, about weather routing, about ordinary professional concerns. When a flare goes up, they respond with discipline, not dread. Dread never disappears. It stops running the show. For the men in steel tubes, the war becomes a series of longer odds. Patrols come back with fewer trophies and more losses. They still believe in skill, in luck, in the sea's neutrality. But belief bends when the sea's neutrality is pierced by metal senses. Früher war die Nacht unser Freund, one commander writes in a letter saved by chance. Now the night reports us. He is not wrong. The ocean has found new eyes and ears. The moral remains complicated. German crews were not villains. Allied crews were not saints. Each did their job with care or fury, boredom or terror. Each lived by systems built far from them. The difference, in May 1943, is that one system synchronized technology, training, production, intelligence. The other did not, or not fast enough. War punishes lag. In the months after the withdrawal, the BDU allows occasional renewed pushes, tries new groupings, rides weather windows, edges closer to the ice. Some convoys will still be savaged. Some escorts will still fall. Black May does not make the sea kind. It makes it predictable enough that a continent can be fed and armed across it. That is the strategic consequence. That is the shadow the month casts into 1944 and beyond. By June 6, 1944, the proof is at anchor off Normandy, an armada without precedent, assembled by means that in 1942 would have seemed an act of faith. The convoys had done their work. The Wolfpacks still existed, but as a factor to be mitigated, not a fate to be feared. The ocean had been turned from an enemy contested nightly to a medium that could be shaped and scheduled. That transformation begins in many rooms and many hulls, but it becomes undeniable in a single month. And if you look sideways at the war's end, you can see its echo. The next generation of submarines will live under longer glide silent on batteries fed by snorkel and later by reactors. The next generation of aircraft and sensors will see farther. But the essential lesson remains dated. May 1943. Do not fight the predator. Starve the system it depends on. Its eyes, its lungs, its time. Return to the opening image. North Atlantic. Not a wall of black, but a mottled field of slate and blue. The same corvette rides easier. The bow digs in, rises, sheds water in a sheet. The radar sweeps because that is what it does. Habit now, not talisman. Keane leans on the rail and listens to the lower, steadier hum of a ship not in the middle of a sprint. He thinks of men in the water months earlier and of an order sent by a man he has never met that took a shadow off his shoulders. He does not call it strategy. He calls it a chance to sleep an hour without waking to the shriek of the klaxon. The final comparison is stark. Not through a brilliant weapon, but through a mesh of adequate ones. Not through a hero's charge, but through 1,000 rehearsed run-ins. Not through luck and weather, but through range, radar, and relentless bearing lines. The Atlantic did not forgive. It yielded to organization. The camera pulls up and back. Convoy dots stitch a line across a cold map. West to east, east to west, supplies going out and bodies coming home, people living because other people kept them fed and armed across a kill zone. We are turning them back, the pilot wrote. They did. A month named for darkness became the place where the night itself flipped loyalties. One line, then silence. The Wolfpack lost the ocean not in a battle, but in a system that learned faster.